Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the government's continued argument that it will stimulate serious growth in our economy, when not only would this be a monumental task for even a wise government right now, but the stated policies of Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng cannot even hypothetically promote growth. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, being clear, Liz Truss's policies are not going to achieve growth. She knows this. Her Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, knows this. As dumb as you may think Truss is, and she's less so than some of her former and current cabinet colleagues, Kwarteng's no idiot. What I'm going to do is explain why growth is not realistic. So, in terms of how to achieve growth and how the Tories' attitude to the economy will not achieve it. So, consider how it's possible. So, if you were Prime Minister or the Chancellor, what can you do to stimulate growth? What can you do to increase our level of GDP? Well, your first problem is Brexit, isn't it? Brexit makes the easiest levers to apply for growth impossible. Brexit has restricted our export growth and significantly increased import growth. If you want to grow the economy, one way is to turn the balance of trade in favour of your exports. But it's harder for British businesses to export now. They face the following problems that similar economies do not when trading, say, with Europe. First, they have to fill in more paperwork than was the case a couple of years ago, and it's virtually none. That means delays and it means costs, making either their goods more expensive and so less competitive, or reducing their profits. Either way, it's a hit to GDP. Second, checks required. This delays the goods, making them less reliable, so less competitive. That's also a hit to GDP. Third, there are import duties which didn't apply before. Another hit to either the competitiveness of the product or the profits of the company. Either way, just as with any other Brexit cost, a hit to GDP. Fourth, businesses are now struggling to find the workers they need to even maintain current levels of production. When I say current, I meant at the point at which Brexit happened. So that means much less growth to their business, where if it just stops them growing, then that restricts GDP growth, doesn't actually hit it. But where it's that they can't even maintain prior production, it's an active hit to GDP because they're less productive. Fifth, some products can't realistically be traded with former customers at all. So we take the case of the Cheshire Cheese Company, who famously explained that it costs more for the health certificate than they're selling their consignments of cheese for. So they can't now sell to customers in Europe at all. Not that it's not possible to send it, but the health certificate that you need with that dairy product costs more than the value of the dairy product. That also hits GDP because the business then has two choices. Either it reduces its exports or it moves some or all of its business away from Britain. Either way, a hit to GDP. And no, we haven't experienced higher exports to other parts of the world to compensate. Wouldn't even make sense in theory. Multiple problems here as well. First, there was nothing stopping us exporting more around the rest of the world as EU or single market members if the rest of the world wanted to buy more of our stuff. Being a member of the single market has no bearing on your exports to the rest of the world at all, other than the fact it gives you rather good trade deals. You just tend to export mostly to the rest of Europe because, well, it's right next door and it's easier and cheaper. Second, it costs a lot more money and time to export to the rest of the world because it's not right next door. You've not only got to deal with different rules and regulations, all in different languages, it's extra costs for each individual country as well, that you want to export to. But the cost of fuel for transport, always high. And much more so when you've got major political instability with a major oil exporter. Guess what? We've got major political instability with a major oil exporter. Third, although in theory different trade deals might open up wider access to other markets, this is not what Brexit has achieved. EU trade deals with the rest of the world were already really good, so it was very difficult to improve on them. The theory was, but they were compromise trade agreements that satisfied all members because any member can block them. We can have our own bespoke ones. Okay, in theory, fine, whatever. But as it happens, our post-Brexit trade deals are all on worse terms than the EU have with those same countries. So in theory, you might have had an argument, but what we're seeing from the trade deals we're striking is, no, this one's worse than the EU have got. So the one with Japan, no, the EU have got a better one. The one with New Zealand, Australia. No, the EU are getting better ones. Don't matter where you go for. No, this is worse than the EU have. So export growth's knackered. The only way the Brexiteers are managing to claim that exports are fine is comparing the pound value of exports from 2016 to now, but that's not taking inflation into account. The pound was worth more in 2016 than it is now. I may correct this in a later video where I sort of drill down on it, but that's going to take some more analysis. But the Office for National Statistics provides relevant data and information. They're not trying to claim that our exports are fine. Our exports are being strangled. And when you compare them with, say, France, which is the most similar economy to ours in the world, you can see just how bad things are. But then there's imports. Because we're struggling to get the workers needed to power our economy, with our blinkered post-Brexit immigration policy, production's down, not just for exports, but for supplying ourselves. That includes essentials like food. We're producing less than we were before Brexit. Last Christmas, there were some foods that we produce completely ourselves. There were some Christmas foods that we just supply ourselves, like turkeys and so on, that we just don't ever import. Last year, we had to import them because we couldn't produce enough. So we couldn't even produce pre-Brexit levels to supply ourselves. We're producing less, but people don't want to consume less. The end result is that imports are going up. Nothing's slowing import growth down. So export growth massively down, import growth significantly up. End result is a strangulation of GDP growth. It's the balance of trade shifting more towards the import side. So that is a hit to GDP. So how else could the government grow the economy? Well, they seem to want to focus on inward foreign investment. But there are three major problems with this. First, the global conditions right now are not encouraging lots of investment. Major political instability on the world stage makes a lot of investors nervous. So realistically, there isn't as much investment going on right now, just across the world in general. So in order to massively ramp this up for the UK, we'd have to increase our competitiveness over other countries because we'd have to nick their share. The only plan the government has to do this is scrapping the cap on bankers' bonuses. But this doesn't stimulate growth. It just encourages bankers to take bigger risks with someone else's money and leave the public with the bill when it all goes tits up, as it did in 2008. The reason there is a cap on bankers' bonuses right now is to avoid another situation like 2008. This is just a way of letting people who are good at avoiding taxes make more money. This does not help us. Second, the government keep alluding to massive changes in regulations, but they don't say what or when. Investments are made over a number of years. Investors need to know what the financial lay of the land is going to look like over those next few years. But the government are threatening to make massive regulatory changes without saying what, without promising an implementation period of several years. It could just happen overnight from what they're saying. That puts off investors as well. The government did us no favours by threatening the independence of the Bank of England or sacking the Treasurer's universally respected permanent secretary for political reasons. Third, if someone's going to invest in the UK, they need to be confident they can sell their product for a good profit. Now, if the business plan involves selling it in both the British and the EU markets, that investment gives a better return if you base it in the EU. Because there are large barriers to trade from Britain to the EU. Not so much the other way around. That's because Britain is much more dependent on imports since Brexit, so we can't afford to have import controls fully in place. Also, the single market's larger, so there's more customers there. So it just makes sense on every level to invest more there. Now, that doesn't mean no investment in Britain. Of course, there will be UK investment. Some businesses will produce largely for the British market, in which case, of course, they're going to set up in the UK. Some may still be able to trade profitably with the EU from a British base as well. So, same thing. It's not that there's no investment. It's just that the net effect is investment is draining from the UK. And in fact, it has been draining from the UK to neighbouring countries ever since 2016 because investors saw the lay of the land a long time ago. And indeed, we've seen this in the data. And that's pretty much it. That's all the government realistic can do. I saw economist Professor Richard Murphy, and I mention him because I know a lot of people mention him in the comments. He took the issue of increased consumer spending seriously as he roundly debunked it. Frankly, I thought he was being far more charitable towards the government than I would be. I'm not even really going to consider it. He explained how we can't expect an increase in consumer spending on that scale because people are already spending everything they have just for the basics, and the government have a formal policy of keeping wage rises down. So if incomes are not going to significantly increase and people are already not saving, they're already spending what they have on things, where's your scope for increasing consumer spending? You know, I mean, the massive industrial action we've got this year is because the government have this policy of suppressing wages. Oh, they want to be a high wage economy? Good one. This means a large increase in consumer spending to eclipse the problems with the balance of trade and foreign inward investment isn't possible. But the thing is, I'd put it much more bluntly than that. If you strangle your exports and you make foreign inward investment less attractive, especially in a global environment of lower overall investment appetites, obviously you can't grow your economy by getting people in Britain to buy more from other people in Britain. As a country, if you want to sell to yourself, you still need the money to do it. The money essentially is supposed to come from outside, being productive, being useful to people outside your market. Lower investment, reduced exports, all mean fewer jobs, lower pay, which is exactly what we're seeing. Now, that's not to say we're not going to see growth before the next election. Of course we are. Recessions don't last forever. We are heading into recession, despite what Truss says. Given that the Bank of England's forecasts so far have been too optimistic, and they forecast a recession lasting over a year, doesn't seem likely that we're going to see this growth until well into 2024. But I talked about the political shenanigans in the earlier video. But hopefully this explains why I can't see serious economic growth being possible with Tory policies in place. We're not going to see that 2.5% because if you look at all the ways it's even in theory possible to stimulate growth, the Conservatives have put blocks in the way and they have no policies for encouraging any of the others. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.